Yay! It's seasonally relevant to celebrate the westernized appropriation of probably pagan holidays, so we should probably play something scary. I would preface this with a short history of horror games, but let's skip the disingenuous history lesson and get right to the game. It's a horror game, and an Argentinian one. The very first commercial game created in Argentina, to be exact. Scratches was released in 2006 to somewhat mixed reviews. GameSpot standing out with the most unflattering, with the headline reading, "Scratches is dull, ugly, a bit short, and a perfect example of exactly why traditional adventure games have fallen out of favor." The guy just tears the game a new asshole, going after every aspect, stating that the only worthwhile feature would be the ability to run the game straight from the disc. Something about that makes me feel like you might be being facetious. I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt though. This is not to say that the game does not have its fans. I mean, just look at the comments for that article, most of them disagree with this guy. I don't think a game like this can be reviewed using games like Resident Evil or Indigo Prophecy as comparisons, which he does. I mean, yes, they are adventure games, but both are vastly different ideas with vastly bigger budgets. This is an indie game and an upstart studio's first try. It's a love letter to an older style. Should you judge it so harshly? So right now I'm gonna judge it harshly. Scratches is a story filled with a clear appreciation of horror writers and horror story tropes, H.P. Lovecraft being one of the more obvious influences. In 1976, Northumberland, England, a budding author named Michael Arthate seeks the seclusion of a lavish Victorian house to finish his latest novel. I know what I thought the second I saw this place. How does a guy with one hit book land this sprawling estate that is clearly probably haunted or a murder house? Well, it's actually explained that the means his friend and real estate agent, Jerry, took to acquire the property may not have been legitimate. Upon arriving at the beautiful Blackwood estate, every conceivable thing goes awry. The electrician doesn't show up, leaving the place in darkness, there's no running water, Michael's car battery's dead. All this paired with the general atmosphere that something in the house is very upset at having a new tenant move in. As Michael is getting acquainted with his new home, he begins finding the writings of its previous owner and unraveling a deeper mystery. Over the 3 days Michael stays in the house, he pretty much completely abandons the idea of finishing his book in pursuit of the truth about Blackwood Manor. The only person he confides in during this time is Jerry, who he demon dials to tell him every new piece of the puzzle he finds. Jerry plays the typical well-meaning skeptic that just wants Michael to finish his book and stop chasing ghosts.
After you finish your book, my friend.
Do people like this really exist? I mean, if your best friend tells you he may have discovered a real murder mystery with supernatural undertones, and up until this point, they've never shown any signs of being a crazy person, wouldn't you want to hear them out? Isn't that what friends do? Jerry's over there flicking a syringe. Like, alright buddy, you've had a lot of excitement for today. Let's get you back in your padded cell. We'll watch some cartoons, but not Flapjack because I know it scares you. In the journals left by James Blackwood, he details his work in South Africa and his study of an undiscovered tribe called the Dalmar. These readings are really the guts of the story, and they were honestly riveting. I wanted to read more. I wanted a whole novel about this stuff. I loved this whole theme because it's so old-fashioned. I mean, we live in a time where there isn't a whole lot of mystery left in the world. This is why we mostly abandon searching for mermaids or dragons. But in my free time, I'm free to do whatever the hell I want. These days we have urban myths, things that might have scientific explanation but still live on the fringes of reality. Having this horror story built around something we, at the time, didn't fully understand brought about all that old mystery and wonder behind cultures we were afraid of. It's very Cannibal Holocaust. It's very that movie Eli Roth made that looks exactly like Cannibal Holocaust. Michael is an odd character. The first night there, he's kind of a prick. He's really full of himself and whines a lot when faced with menial tasks like waiting for an electrician or checking the fuse box.
And let me know if you see anything burned.
As in black spots?
Yes, black spots.
Alright, I'm on it.
He also seems to blame everyone but himself for his own misfortune.
Jerry, I'm freaking out. This is getting on my nerves. Did you call Mr. Busy Electrician who couldn't hold on for just 5 more minutes? I ran out of batteries. All because of that bloody fog. And you're the one who got me into this mess in the first place.
This is called the fallacy of causality, Mike. You can't go through life pointing your finger at everyone but yourself. Later, Michael becomes pretty obsessed with discovering the truth, and his search begins to parallel the previous owner's downward spiral. I don't have a whole lot of complaints about this game's story. It's a small story with few characters and one location, but those are the ones that interest me. Like a lot of stories, I find myself at odds with the ending. I think it bugs me because it ends on the wrong note. I think any good story needs to come full circle, have a bookend to give us closure. And throughout the game, it was obvious what it should be. Michael finishing his story. And in all fairness, this was mentioned at the end. Michael says,
"It was thanks to my encounter below that house that I was able to finish my book and become a prolific writer."
but he ignored his book up until the end, so I don't know why this experience gave him the ending for his book. Did he plagiarize the events of these 3 days? How would that make sense? He already had a whole book written sans ending. He seems pretty shook up by the experience, so I don't think it gave him a burst of creativity. I don't know, man. I enjoyed the story. It just ended a bit flat. The version I played is subtitled The Director's Cut. This is because it included a short continuation of the story following a reporter that is sent to Blackwood sometime later to learn what he can about the mystery surrounding the place before its impending demolition. The coolest part about this was seeing familiar locations after they had been abandoned and vandalized. Aw, our trusty phone. What did they do to you? Your little dial. If this was an attempt to amend the ending of the original, I think more so it just restates the ending more clearly in case you didn't catch it the first time. Like, oh, maybe you didn't like it because you didn't hear me. They escaped the biodome. Faulkner gets away. Scratches has some pretty classic gameplay. It's a first-person point-and-click adventure. Unlike a lot of other games in the genre that are essentially a series of static images, this game has a camera that follows your cursor as you pan around what appears to be a large panoramic image to give the illusion of 3 dimensions. As soon as I was given control of Michael, I was disoriented by the speed of the cursor and how unwieldy it is. It's kind of like playing with a trackball. You slide the mouse one direction, and even though you may have stopped moving your hand, there is still some slide left over that keeps the cursor moving. I even turned the sensitivity down all the way, but it was still bothersome throughout. I had to be careful. It was like I was controlling a goddamn Gundam suit. Over the course of 3 days, we turn over all the locked drawers and hidden rooms Blackwood has to offer. As someone that loves to snoop around, this was like breaking and entering porn. Sometimes Michael wasn't as into it as me though. What? I didn't want to go through a bunch of trinkets and perfumes. Are you shitting me? Those are my favorite things. You'll find plenty of interesting things to read, and if you're feeling lonely, you can call Jerry or your assistant Barbara. You'll spend a lot of time with your trusty phone. I know firsthand that it's an invaluable resource for a hermit. There's a certain criteria you have to meet to proceed to the next day, but there doesn't seem to be a particular order in which you need to do them. Going through doors triggers a Resident Evil style animation. That's neat, but they kind of slow the pace of the game. I'm not even saying Resident Evil did it right. It was kind of annoying then as well. I think if we're stomping all over through this house and going back and forth, it would be more efficient if Michael didn't close every door behind him. Especially if you're trying to get somewhere quickly. God damn it, Michael, this is important! Get your feet out of your ass! There isn't exactly what I'd call puzzles in the traditional sense. The gameplay goes for realism, so you don't find any elaborate, inconvenient lockboxes or slide puzzles. It's essentially believable problem solving for the most part. Sometimes this proves difficult because this is a very dark game with pretty detailed environments, so it's not hard to completely miss a crucial item and wander around in circles as a result. While exploring the second floor master bedroom, there's a little mirror on a swivel. I figured since they superfluously let you wiggle it back and forth that this was supposed to be a visual clue to remind me down the line that I might need it. So much further on, you get into the family mausoleum and it's too dark to see down the steps. So seeing as though there's a window on the ceiling bringing in some light, I thought I was pretty clever for remembering that mirror. Yeah, I'd use it to reflect some light down there. So I head back to that mirror and it doesn't give me the option to take it, so I give up on the idea. I finally broke down and looked at a walkthrough to discover that I needed to use a screwdriver to remove the mirror from its stand before taking it. Well, what was it, too heavy? I'm carrying so much stuff as it is. Get your shit together, Michael. Gotta plunder these corpses. I should mention that there is a hint system, if that's, the kind of person you are, if that's how you choose to live your life. There is no scale in which I would describe this game as ugly. I'm so in love with video games as an art form that it would be hard for me to describe any video game as ugly. I mean, I guess I don't like looking at Glover as much as I like looking at Human Revolution. This is not a big budget release with noteworthy graphics, but there's also nothing egregious about its look. It doesn't do enough graphically to look bad. It's not loaded with cutscenes or animated characters. It's just you in an empty house. Or is it? I felt one of the game's biggest strengths was its atmosphere. I know how these games work. I know nothing's gonna kill me. I'm not gonna have to run for my life and hide in a locker. Despite that, I was genuinely creeped out the majority of the time. At one point you have to go into the basement to check the fuse box. Paired with my apprehension for basements and all subterranean areas, the usual mysterious piano music stopped and was replaced by a monotone ambience and an overall feeling of dread that had me desperately wanting to go back upstairs. I like Michael's voice. It's got some gravel in it. It sounds older, sounds more worldly. The whole time I was playing this, I was thinking that Jerry sounded an awful lot like another adventure game figure, Jonathan Boakes, the man behind the Darkfall and Lost Crown series. Being a fan of his work, I was able to pick up on his adorably spotty voice work immediately.
Bloody hell. He was supposed to meet you at the gates early this morning.
Maybe Jonathan Boakes is a good voice actor. European actors kind of get a pass for me because they invented acting. There are some pretty douchey jump scares that I was not expecting because they aren't common in point and click games. It's kind of like if I was listening to Philip Glass and then all of a sudden... Wait a minute, I think I'm starting to get this. So he's like a swamp thing. Not again, Dad! To be honest, I played this game around the time it came out, and it scared me then, and now 8 years later, it's still pretty creepy. But it's also much more clear to me that a big part of my enjoyment for this game came from the fact that it was clearly made by fans of adventure games, and fans of horror. It doesn't really need to reinvent the genre because that was the genre they wanted to contribute to. I think people like the GameSpot reviewer sees these conventional adventure games as a misstep, but failed to realize that these guys told the story they wanted to tell in the way they wanted to tell it. It was by all means a success to them. There are games with fully rendered 3D environments and games without them, because it's not a necessity in this genre. There's a bigger focus on other aspects, things like atmosphere and logic, and less of a focus on action or survival. These games don't have to reach the level of games you think are better. They can exist in tandem because they have a fan base. And what makes a game good is subjective. According to that review, this game should serve as a nail in the coffin for those clinging to a romantic notion of how much better the genre used to be. Well, I don't see there being any stop to the flood of retro side-scrolling games coming out. Making a game in a style that had a spike in popularity at one point in time is not a desperate grab for nostalgia. It's an artistic medium. That's like saying an oil painting is antiquated or clumsy or ugly, solely because we have the ability to use digital tablets to make paintings. I guess the message through all this is, I don't know, don't be an asshole. You fucking asshole?